Welcome everyone to our last session of the day. Let's begin our trialogue on our balanced approach to crypto assets. I would like to welcome on board our speakers of the session. First, we have Mr. Nishit. He's the founder from Nishit Desai Associates. Second, we have Mr. Harvey. He's the head of digital advisory from International Monetary Fund. Next, we have Mr. Naveen. He's the Managing Director, South Asia and MENA from Ripple. And finally, we have Ms. Sheila. She's the Head of Blockchain and Distributed Ledger Technology from World Economic Forum. Over to you, Mr. Nashid.
Thank you so much, Shivani, for choosing a lawyer to give a last word. So it's interesting to have last session, and thank you for giving me an opportunity to moderate this. It's wonderful subject, and I think very, very important for almost every government in the world. So, but very excited. I'm very excited that we have an illustrious panel today with the leaders from IMF, World Economic Forum, and Ripple. So you got all the global body, global thought leader, and actually global business person from Ripple, which everybody knows about. So our panelists today would bring expertise in policy, business, and technology, and we hope to discuss the transformative potential of crypto and crypto assets, including their interplay with blockchain technology, and what a balanced approach to them would look like from a regulatory perspective. First of all, I would like to ask each of our panelists to set the tone with how they believe crypto asset can be transformational from a technology perspective, and particularly in the context of developing economy like India. To the extent you can add how your institution looks at the technology, that would be great too. So we'll have Sheila, Harvey, Naveen, all of you. Can you give us a couple of minutes perspective on this subject and set a tone as to how you believe crypto asset can be transformational from technology perspective? We'll get into more regulatory in the second part of the session. So first, over to you.
Good. You want me to first, Nishit?
Yeah, sure. That would be wonderful, Harvey.
And so in my capacity at the IMF, we do a lot of research about how technology, economics, and regulatory questions are now combined. In every single questions you look around, there's always those three elements, and we're trying to understand those things. So your question is relevant also in the domain of crypto, of course. And I think, first of all, I think it's important to notice that 2020, very interesting, maybe a turning point in the history of digital asset, I believe. First of all, because of COVID, right? That digital payment has done in India what demonetizations couldn't in so much time, right? The switch to digital payment has been pretty much, has been stunning. The ban, and we know it's in sort of limbo in India, but there is some movement that indicates that there is a readiness to change at this point. There's also the question of remittances. I know Naveen has a lot to say about that I think is essential in India. First of all, because of COVID, it has dropped, I think, around 23% remittances from abroad, which is both an opportunity for crypto asset to play a significant role, but also we see that in India, people see that as a way of hedging their risks differently than the traditional gold. And finally, there has been an increased interest during COVID-19 on both technologies that are related. One is stablecoins, which is a stable version of the better known Bitcoin and other crypto assets. Another phenomenon that has accelerated in the past 2 years has been central bank digital currencies, which are, if you will, a version using often the same technology brought about by Bitcoin and other coin, but a version that is governed, and we'll talk more with Sheila and Naveen about that, by the government, by central banks in particular. So in the context of COVID-19, with the need for payment to become digital, number one, but also for the reason that big players such as Facebook, for example, with Libra, are introducing their own version of stablecoins. Stablecoins have exploded in the past year, in the past 6 months, in fact. Because of that, you're seeing a motion. There's not one day when a country doesn't announce their intentions vis-a-vis central bank digital currency. And India had announced last year that they were looking into this. It's not clear what is India. What we're observing is that pretty soon you will count on a couple of hands the countries that do not have some sort of research program going on central bank digital currencies. What is interesting about this kind of trend is the way I like to see it is central banks are, as they're investigating this technology, these processes, they're also showing the way to the other digital payments about how it should be regulated, how it should be designed, how risks should be managed. They're also investigating that, but that could, even though central bank digital currencies are a consequence of crypto asset, if you will, a reaction to crypto asset, they may in turn provide some very valuable input to feed back the ecosystem with their regulation, their design element. And that's the other element of what we're observing in the evolution of technology in this domain, is that the lessons learned from countries on CBDC is feeding back the evolution of digital asset. The FATF rule, this organization that regulate risks and AML CFT compliance, anti-money laundering, and countering the financing of terrorism. They are working very, very hard on that, and they even recently provided some guidance about how to comply with the risk management that have. So that's evolving very, very fast. In the US, just yesterday, banks have been authorized for the first time officially to operate for crypto assets. So that also could be a game changer. So you see how this old COVID-19, the need to get cash because of the risk of the pandemics, is driving the discussion at a pace we did not expect, simply put. With that, with this increased pace of adoption comes an increased pace of risks. And that's that we want to always put on the table. Every time we talk about benefits, we have to talk about the risks so we can better handle the risk. It's not about, and the IMF position has never been to say no to crypto, no to this technology. It has always been, let's engage the conversation on those technologies while understanding the risks. And together with the World Bank, this is the reason why we had what we call the Bali FinTech Agenda. If you Google it, the Bali FinTech Agenda, it offers guidance, 12 elements to guide the conversations that embraces the risks while mitigating the risks. So this motion, these trends are specifically acute in 2020. I think you're on mute.
I think.
Yeah, Sheila, would you like to say something now?
Thank you. Thank you.
I think it has been nice to interact with you always, and Navina would come to you afterwards. So thank you.
Well, I'll first echo everything that my colleague from the IMF, Hervé, said. We certainly also here at the World Economic Forum are seeing an absolute explosion in, I think it's not even so much in the experiments happening in central bank digital currencies, it's in the willingness to publicly talk about the experiments that were already happening on central bank digital currencies. We issued in Davos this past year a central bank digital currency policymakers toolkit, which was responsive to a request from the technologists at approximately 40 different central banks, and it included actors like the IMF and World Bank in its creation, that they were looking to remove some of the fear and even I would say some of the stigma around crypto assets and around this notion that CBDC was the bedfellow of Bitcoin, for example. It, in fact, is quite a different thing. And so I'll note that at the forum, our position quite formally is that we are technology agnostic. And I think it's important to note that a CBDC does not, part of the definition of CBDC is not that it is backed by a distributed ledger or by a blockchain. There are, in fact, many reasons why you might make a different technological or technical choice on the back end. You may choose to have a more centralized system that underlies a CBDC. That, in my mind, and the forum's view, is not a reason to throw out a CBDC itself. There are reasons why the technical choice should follow what the policy goals really are. And I think those policy goals are quite context specific. So India's views on a CBDC are going to be quite different from, South Korea's, are going to be different from the Eastern Caribbean central banks for very good reasons. So that's just kind of some color I would add from our perspective. But I wanted to shift a little bit to talk about crypto assets a little bit more broadly. And I specifically wanted to talk about a area that is, I think, not quite getting the same attention outside of the blockchain circles, which is this notion of decentralized finance, or DeFi. Now, DeFi really is about building on top of a decentralized system, mostly on top of an actual blockchain-backed system. So it does have, as part of its definition, that technical component to it, although we're interested to see if there's a way that some of the DeFi mechanisms will actually be translated into more traditional finance landscapes. So what am I even talking about? So I think it's important to note that, so what are crypto assets fundamentally? Well, they're digital assets that use cryptography to regulate not only the generation of new units of the asset, but also to verify their transfer. Okay, and they can verify the transfer when they use a blockchain or DLT without a central party. So it enables this explosion in peer-to-peer engagement, which is something that is very familiar in many developing economies and is very familiar in India as well. You could think about this as, the Sewa model or the Grameen model of kind of peer-to-peer exchange. This micro-lending, right, is really kind of about this peer-to-peer exchange. So what DeFi does is it basically encourages interoperability of some of these things, and it removes, or it can remove, some of the very lengthy processes around obtaining a loan, for example, or some of the fee structure that can sometimes come along with that. So they represent this really new way of thinking about traditional financing. Now, what I think is important is that interoperability is to some extent being built in. So the idea is not to create and blow up the system and create a brand new system for financing. It's to think about on-ramps and off-ramps into that system and where it might make sense, particularly for those who are unbanked or underbanked. So I'll talk just quickly about a couple of applications of DeFi that we're seeing. Crypto lending, I've already alluded to. I think our view is that remains the most popular application today. And again, I think it's because the notion of a peer-to-peer loan is very familiar. It's not, unnerving to people. And the idea here is that we could actually create instant crypto loans that don't come with the lengthy applications, the hefty interest rates at times. We're seeing interest in this in the mortgage space, for example, which is a little bit more relevant, I think, in the United States and some countries here. But we're seeing just an easier way to access loans with little transaction costs. And we're seeing the ability to think about what credit checks might look like for those who don't have credit. Another example is token issuance platforms. So here, blockchain tokens are something that is, there's a lot going on with tokenization of assets and tokenized securities. But issuance platforms can actually work together with financial bodies, with lawyers, with others to make a token creation process much more straightforward for clients. So we actually think that this will be interesting, and to see how this might fill a technical gap of decentralized technologies and organizations could be very interesting. I mentioned crypto loans in the context of peer-to-peer and credit, but I think that just calling out banking the unbanked and underbanked is a really interesting way that we could see some of this happening in the DeFi context. And I think Naveen will probably address the remittances aspect of this a bit. And then lastly, I'll just mention decentralized exchanges. It's important to be familiar with this concept as well of a decentralized exchange. Before, or currently really, an investor really primarily relies on a centralized exchange to buy and trade crypto assets or any other assets. And the exchange fees can be quite high, particularly if you're talking about volatile currencies. There are also security risks and other things. The decentralized exchanges were built in response to some of these issues. They're peer-to-peer, so you don't really have a transaction fee layer. And they're not stored in exchange wallets for the most part. They're stored, they really hold their own assets. So I think these are some of the areas that I wanted to talk about where the technology is enabling some new models that we're seeing and think are worth paying attention to and could be quite exciting in a financial landscape like India.
Thank you, Sheila. And Nain, can I turn to you? I think you have business experience. And do you see some philosophical disconnect between CBDC and the regular crypto? And of course, you might want to comment on Sheila's take also. And whatever other things you might want to say, please share your views. Thank you. Yeah. You have something to say, Sheila? No. Okay.
Surely, Nishad. Thank you very much. So just building on what Sheila was saying. So what I want to do for my audience is, and particularly, I mean, there are a lot of people from India who have joined in as well, to bring this home. So to an average audience, I mean, they are probably wondering, okay, how does crypto will benefit my life, right? So if tomorrow crypto was allowed in India or it's being allowed in different parts of the world, how is it helping me for tomorrow to be better than today? And I think there we can take a few examples to kind of bring it home for the audience here in India, and it's also relevant in other emerging markets in the world. So India is the largest receiver of remittances in the world, $79 billion US, and about 35 million Indians live overseas who send money back to their families. And a lot of people don't know this, but India also sends a lot of money overseas, about $18.75 billion US a year for education, for medical services and other things. And combined, if we round it off, it's about $100 billion US of money going in and out. And today, on an average, we pay 7%. So $7 billion of friction money gets paid every year for money coming in and money going out. And in our view, that's way too high, right? And so by using cryptos as a bridge asset, which some of our solutions do, and many of other people are also working on this around the world, you're able to reduce this friction dramatically, whereby it's not $7 billion, but it's a much smaller number that one has to pay for. So just to put 7 billion or 7% in context, the interest rate in Western world are almost next to nothing. They're almost zero. So for somebody who's sending $200 US or $500 US a month, a 7% being taken out is fairly high. And I think all of us, particularly policymakers, have the responsibility to bring it out dramatically. And that's the reason we as a company are working with in respective markets so that this cost of remittances goes down. Now, another good use case, if we look at in the Indian context, is very, very simple. So the way I think about it would be yoga is to India like pizza is to Italy, right? So if the yoga market globally currently is about $100 billion US, out of that, about $80 billion is just classes, people being taught yoga. And I think all of us now, we know because of COVID, we are all very comfortable learning and doing things on Zoom. So very, very simply, say, for example, Sheila wants to have a class in yoga and there is an Indian instructor who's out there. It's very easy for her to essentially say, yeah, you know what, I've looked and you have all the certifications and I would like to take a yoga trial class from you. And that's how the yoga market world over works. But you know what, today, the biggest problem that Sheila will have after taking that class is how to remit that $25 US for the class to this particular person. So there is a huge use case around micropayments, around gig economy, around employing millions of people in India who are employable, but the buyer of those services is somewhere else in the world. And today they have no way to remit that $20 US, $50 US, because Sheila, if she needed to send that $25 US to her yoga instructor, she'll end up probably spending $100 US just to make that transfer. And in some way, we are sort of stopping huge amount of innovation to happen around India just because micropayments can't essentially move cross-border with almost zero friction or with almost minimal friction, right? So this, I talked more about demand side, and there are hundreds of innovators in India who are waiting to build business models if the friction of moving money around the world was to go down. But let's look at the supply side itself, right? So about more or less 1/3 of all developers in the world are in India. And these are in two sectors. They are in the informal sector or the gig economy. So that means, let's assume Hervé wants to get a design done, some kind of a code done, and he asks Naveen, and Naveen for X dollars per hour ready to work with him and ship him the design of the code that he's looking for. Or these could be very large Indian outsourcing companies who are working on technologies based on the work that essentially, or use cases that are being worked on overseas, right? So these are outsourcing companies which are doing the back-end plumbing of the coding that needs to be done. Now, let's assume we didn't have the ecosystem in our own country. So in some way, it's like not having internet in our own country. Then for the gig economy workers or the formal companies to get that ecosystem experience, to build on the top of it will be very difficult. For them to get paid in crypto assets will be very difficult. And all they're doing on their side is to be able to get value for the work that they have done, and then to be able to convert that value into some kind of fiat asset. So back to you, Nishit. So these were just some of the examples.
Excellent, excellent. I think we got some idea about what are the transformational, issues would be coming up in the coming times. And but I think important thing is the big elephant in the room with regard to crypto asset is how to regulate them, whether we can regulate them at all. And Sheila, you have done a lot of work around that. So we noticed that you have been on various blockchain policy committees. Naveen, you can also react, and Harvey is most welcome. So how do you think we can balance the benefits with oft-outed risks such as volatility, fraud, monetary policy concerns, and stuff like that? So how do you balance it, if there are some thoughts on that? But if you guys could be a little quick, then we can, have a few minutes for question and answers. Spend a couple of minutes. Thank you.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. Well, I think it's just really important to not, there's a tendency, I think, to think that all crypto assets should be regulated exactly the same way. And of course, we always want to fit a new innovation into our existing regulatory model. We try to regulate it, we try to regulate an elephant like a snake, right? It just doesn't, the same methods don't always work. So I think that there is a lot of exciting innovation happening around the world that we are certainly paying close attention to in regulatory sandboxes and other spaces. But I want to note specifically, because we spent some time on these two topics, primarily central bank digital currencies and that kind of digital currency angle versus a more broader crypto asset model. And I think those are distinct things. When it comes to a CBDC specifically, just to make this point very, very clear, people will say, oh, CBDC is like fiat money. No. It actually literally is fiat. It is a liability held by the central bank of a country. It needs to be taken very, very seriously. The regulation around it is going to necessarily be, tighter and more controlled, if you will, because of the nature of what it represents. It is a liability on the country's, books, if you want to put it that kind of crudely. Versus, I think, thinking about crypto assets more broadly, they function sometimes like commodities, sometimes like securities. There's ongoing debate in different countries about which of these models is better. So it's important to think about that as well.
Okay.
I think two quick points. Yeah, absolutely. So 2 quick points from my side. So firstly, it's better to have cryptos on the grid than for them to be off the grid. Right? That means it's better to regulate them and have some kind of framework versus they getting created in a gray zone or where consumer protection or lots of other AML and compliances are not being met. So either through an exchange framework or any kind of framework that the government decides, right? And then the second thing that I would say is public consultation is very important, right? So like India has a history of having consultation around a number of other public policy decisions that the government has made. It could be the TRAI, it could be net neutrality, number of places where the government has said, we will consult with the private players, we'll consult with the stakeholders, we consult, and then we'll make the best decision that's for India. So that the right decision, as exactly the way what Sheila was mentioning, so right use cases can be discussed. Some of them are good, some of them are not so good. And then accordingly, the regulation can be put in place.
Yeah. I think like every...
Maybe I can add.
Sorry. Please go ahead. You were saying
Oh,
something?
sorry, no, just to build on what Sheila and Naveen said. To me, the biggest mistake that the crypto asset environment or industry has done is to think of crypto asset as technology. What we're learning from, and Sheila has said that CBDC for one has nothing to do with technology. It uses technology. And what we're finding as we are designing, as countries are designing technology, central bank digital currencies, they're actually not spending a lot of time on the technology questions, as opposed to the crypto asset industry that they are spending most of their time on the technology questions. I mean, what the CBDC experience is teaching, I think, or the lessons learned, let me put that this way, from the CBDC evolution that would benefit the crypto asset industry is in the design. It's about thinking of objectives. For example, in the case of CBDC, it could be financial inclusion, it could be financial stability, it could be economic growth, it could be empowerment of women. It has to have some objectives. Then in the design itself, that has elements that have nothing to do with technology, such as risk management, flexibility of the technology, of the implementation. The degree of anonymity is important. It's not yes or no, as the crypto world believes. The availability, is it interest bearing or not? The list goes on and on and on and on. We just issued a paper at the IMF on those design last month in June, that I think contains those elements that are beneficial for the crypto asset world. The reason I'm mentioning this is lawyers should not spend time regulating technology. They should spend that are more impactful to protect consumer, to protect financial stability. And this is where there's a gap between the crypto asset industry and the regulators, is to understand those other design elements.
Absolutely. I think, thank you so much. In fact, often that is the concern of the regulators, that, this is anonymous, it's not traceable. And, actually speaking, possibly crypto is more traceable than the cash, which may be circulating somewhere, But let me give our perspective on this balancing the regulations and our suggestions to Indian government, and then open floor to our audience for a brief question and answer if we have some time. So, historically what happened, it was in 2013 that we started advising on cryptocurrency, and we had specialization at that point of time. And we studied almost everything, including exchange control regulations. We took, whether it's foreign currency, whether it's currency or not, and all this kind of stuff. And we took a position that it was not per se an illegal activity, okay, because it doesn't fall in the concept of money, it doesn't fall in the concept of currency, foreign exchange, stuff like that. And this stand, it took almost, 7-8 years. There were a lot of issues in between. And ultimately, it has been vindicated by our Supreme Court in a case where we represented IMAI, Internet Mobile Association of India, in a challenging case in an RBI restriction. Because RBI did not ban it, so to say, but it blocked the banks from operating the account. And that is why we went to Supreme Court, and Supreme Court said that was not correct, and it's been restored. So in many ways, I think it is crypto is not illegal per se. That is the first position. Coming to the regulations, we published our first cryptocurrency paper in 2013, and then blockchain paper in 2016, and advise that what should be the kind of ecosystem we need to develop. And then we began to advise leading global and Indian exchanges and all this kind, including Ripple. We worked together. Thank you. And then we submitted detailed policy suggestions to the Government of India in December 2018. And we suggested that crypto assets should be regulated in a balanced manner and not a ban. You should not ban it, If there are side effects to that, those effects have to be curtailed, not the medicine itself. A ban would again be subject to constitutional challenge. That's what is our view. And a new law with new regulator having expertise in both economics and financial, plus a little bit of technical, would be ideal. I think that would be a good thing to do. And of course, having said that, there are already various avenues under our existing laws to license and regulate crypto businesses. And India has a good overall legal system. We have laws to curtail money laundering, we have laws to curtail black money, we have laws to curtail terrorism. Everything is there. But it is important that the specific legislation can be used to make sure that we get more benefit out of the crypto than otherwise. And we can have a reasonably good licensing system to regulate crypto business. That is what is our perspective. And I don't want to take too much time. We are about 8-9 minutes to have question answers, and if we can look at them, so let us see where the question answers. I think.
So, Mr. Desai, first question that we have is why are crypto assets hard hit with regulations and what is the future?
Yeah, would anybody like to talk about it? Or I can react.
I think simple way I look at it is the future is simple. Like, right, imagine if 1995 somebody was saying, hey, we will going to ban the internet, right? So it's impossible to, now you look back and then say, hey, you know what, it's impossible. So similarly, in some way, the cat is already out of the bag. It's being used by a very large number of people. Just to give one statistic, say Coinbase in the US has got 35 million users already, right? So when a large portion of people start to use it around the world, it's already reached a certain critical mass. It's hard to put the cat back into the bag. So now some mechanism has to be worked out for it to be regulated and make sure that the right usage is in place.
I think the main thing is that there is always fear of unknown. And if something goes wrong, then people will point finger at government and say, oh, what were you doing? Were you sleeping? You didn't do anything about it. So best thing for government is to say, no, we don't want to touch this and we not allow this. So forgetting there are 1,000 benefits, but one negative could kill the whole stuff. I think fortunately in India, it has been good that Supreme Court of India has validated that it is not illegal. And at the same time, now there is no ban imposed by the government. There was some proposal we saw some time ago. What happened, I don't know. But at the same time, we believe that government is also slowly understanding that it is not advisable to ban. I think there are benefits to that. Blockchain industry may not even exist in a proper shape if there is no crypto. It's an outcome. So I think now people are beginning to get more understanding. Maybe Sheila, you have a point of view.
Yeah, I think certainly in the earlier days, we were seeing a lot of fear-based regulation. The idea that this is something that is threatening. It's all just Bitcoin, which is the provenance of criminal activity, and safe harbor for criminals, this kind of thing. And I think part of what our work really focused on, I'd say even in the 2017 to 2019 period, was really removing some of that fear, pointing out, as others have noted, that there are clear benefits here, and that there are ways of mitigating the risk. And not all of those ways necessitate regulation. Certainly, to I think Hervé's point about regulating the technology, it's the activity that we are really looking to stymie, like the criminal kinds of activity and things like this. And we do have systems for doing that. It's a matter of thinking about how those systems intersect or interact with this new reality. And I think over to Naveen's point, we're now in $1 billion of crypto assets, right? We've crossed the mark, and this is becoming a booming market. And so I think it's important to cultivate fertile ground for growth and innovation here, at the same time being mindful that basic principles like consumer protection and fraud prevention remain important. So regulation that is more practically minded as opposed to fear-based, I think, is going to get us where we need to be. And I agree with you. I think that we're seeing, we've already seen, I would say, a transformation or transition from the one model to the more productive model.
Yeah. And I think one good thing that has happened is, I think majority or most of the developed countries, or most of the countries, have goes banned. You know, there are some regulations, some other safeguards that are taken, but I would say 99% of the countries are not banned. You know, and that also gives comfort, I believe, and I hope that gives comfort to government of India as well. That other countries how they are managing.
Mhm.
So every sword has good use and the bad use. And technology is agnostic. So how you use the technology is very important. And I think world is becoming more and more transparent. Also, let us not forget that all said and done, what is happening around the world, a lot of things come to light, a lot of traceability is there, etc. So on the one side there are bad things that are happening, but on the other hand, money laundering or traceability or banks, what would you do with the money if you can't deposit in a bank? So those kind of things are, also happening. So it's very interesting. Anyway, let us, Harvey, you have any point of view, or we go to any other question?
Just quickly, because part of the question was the future. To me, it's clear to me that stable coins represent really where the market is, as opposed to volatile crypto, which will remain an investment tool rather than a tool in itself. So we know that Naveen's company has been showing the way into this world. We now see that PayPal may propose their own crypto assets. We know Libra. So boys are now in the place. Now the banks, as I said before, in United States are able to provide custody services. So now you've got those big regulated entities that are stepping it with stablecoin. On top of that, we believe at the IMF that there is a place for CBDC or central banks, which are, of course, the regulator by excellence, either through something we call synthetic CBDCs, whereby a provider, private sector, could, under certain condition, provide a sort of CBDC that may be backed by the central bank. So there's a sweet spot here that may represent, in some countries, an opportunity of the future.
Okay. Any other question? We are left with
Yes.
about a minute now.
So from Akash Tiwari, we have, what's your view on the amount of power and resources required to mine cryptocurrencies? How can economies ensure sustainability?
I think this will be an important question that that will need to get answered over time. In Greta Thunberg's world, I think we all will need to be responsible and come up with solutions to figure out that we can't be using a huge amount of power to essentially provide resources to the new kind of blockchain systems that we are building. So, but I think to my mind, there will be some technological breakthroughs that will happen around it. And clearly, this is a question that really is underaddressed, which will need to be addressed in the future.
Yeah, with oil barrels becoming $0 a barrel, I think not bad. Okay, I'm saying that energy has become so cheap, but it's not going to remain that way, and it's again environmentally unfriendly. So I think the question is very good. That what kind of power and what kind of other things, but there are a lot of consequences too in developing that. So we'll have to find better ways of working on the system as a whole. Yeah. Any next question? I think we're almost 21:50 now. My apologies
Yes.
to stop, or you want to take a question one more and close it?
Up to
Because
you, everyone. We do have questions, but if you would like to log out on time, even that would be okay with us.
because fortunately this is the last session, so nobody's else waiting.
So we can take a question or two, Nishit. I think
Okay,
if
so
people have been waiting for us so long, why not?
Okay.
Let's take one more question. So it's from Mr. Dhruv Bajaj. And he wants to know what could be the next big use cases of crypto assets in India besides cross-border payments?
So I actually think it's crypto lending, crypto loans, kind of what I'd said. I think there's a tremendous market for peer-to-peer lending that has not yet been able to explode because of the need to actually physically exchange cash in many cases. And I think that thinking about doing that with crypto assets is very powerful and could create a very big market.
And
I
also
would say
possibility is,
sorry.
No.
I would say content monetization. So as you know, India has a huge English-speaking population which can write for the world, and we have a huge Bollywood industry selling songs and selling movies, right? And these can be sold around the world. Why shouldn't somebody in Russia be able to download Indian music and Indian content, and then to be able to use cryptos to essentially pay for it, not worrying about the cost of remittances? And this also helps for people to maintain privacy of the user, because today what is happening is either people have to pay subscription, so they have to pay minimum $50 or $60 because they can't pay 10 cents per article, or they have to go and sell your data on the web. So in some way, your privacy is getting compromised. So to my mind, for a country like India, content monetization is a big use case that still is just in very, very early stages.
Excellent, I think. So I think we have across 2 more minutes, and anything more, we can close it now, Shivani?
Of course.
Yeah.
Thank you all the speakers. Thank you everyone. Thank you so much, all our delegates, for making this session possible. I hope you all gained something out of this fest, and hoping to see you all again. This is me signing off. Thank you and good night.
Thank you
everybody.
very much. It was
Thank you very
wonderful.
much.
Arvind, Naveen, and Shil, all of you did a wonderful job. I really appreciate your contribution, and thank you. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and ideas. Thank you.
Thank you, Nishit. Thank you, Sheila. Thank you,
Thank you
Hervé.
all.
Bye.
Thank you for having
Everybody.
us.
Bye, guys.
Bye.